Hey there, and welcome to Rob's Custom Woodshop. My name's Rob, and today I'm going to be building this 48-inch vanity. Like always, to start off with, I mark and break down my plywood into more manageable pieces using my Kreg AccuCut and my circular saw. At about this time, I started to think I need a longer track, so look for that addition coming soon to my shop. As I cut, I use painter's tape and label and mark the final dimensions on each of my parts, according to my cut list. Then, using my table saw, I cut my pieces into final dimensions. Now that all the pieces have been cut to final dimension, I've orientated the sides to how I want them so that I can draw the lines for the toe kicks. Now while I'm making marks, I'm also going to make marks for reference lines for the dados that go on the insides of these panels. I'm going to mark out the bottom of my cabinet because it has two notch outs on each side and a dado that runs in. So just a really fast view of how I mark things. Once I lay out my dado lines, I mark inside the depth and which line is closest to my fence. And I do this on all my pieces. Now I do these layout lines like this for a couple of reasons. One, I'm getting older and I tend to forget. And two, sometimes I get distracted or called away and I know exactly where I left off. So just as a quick tip, to make things easier while cutting the notches out for my cleats, what I use to help me set my guide up is I use a piece of scrap 3/4 inch plywood that I had left over, and I cut it to 1 3/4 inches, knowing that my jigsaw from the fence to the blade is 1 3/8 and the depth of my notches is 3/8 of an inch. I simply clamp on the piece, flush with the outside, and then install my guide right up against. And then when I remove the clamps, it is exactly the right measurement for the notches I need. And just like that, 3 perfect notches. Now the notches for the toe kicks don't have to be as exact. So I just measured up with my tape measure, struck a line for my guide, and I'll cut them that way. And of course, you could always freehand it, but since this will be seen, I'd prefer straight lines. Now the notches I've marked out on the bottom, I'm not going to cut out at this point. Since there's a dado that comes right out beside, I don't want to have my notches cut too far in by accident. I want to put the dados in first and then cut the notches out. Now I have my dado stack set up, so I'll do a quick test cut to see if I have the width correct. It's a perfect fit, so now I'm ready to start making my dados. So I'm set up to cut all the rabbets out of my cleat. Once I get all that done, I'll reset everything and start cutting the dados. Now that the dados are completed, I'm going to dry fit the pieces to confirm the parts I have drawn for the notches I want to cut out are in the exact spot I need them. My lines are in the exact same spot, so I will cut the notches now. Now I have my guide set up. It's set to cut and just leave just a little sliver, and whatever's left over I can just sand down flush in the final product. So after I cut the notches, I re-dry fit all the pieces to make sure that all my joints were flush and square. Now I'm ready to reassemble using glue and screws. Just a quick tip. To make sure my screw holes are centered in my dado, I'll drill a hole on the opposite side and then countersink on the other side. I'm going to do the glue up in 2 stages. First, I'm going to put the center sections onto the bottom with the top cleats on, and then the second stage, I'm going to put the sides on and the back cleats, making sure everything stays nice and square as I screw and glue. Once the carcass assembly is together and square, I check the openings in several places to confirm the measurements of my drawers. As you can see, my 1/2-inch plywood has a bow to it. That bow goes away as I cut the plywood into smaller strips and then into final dimensions. Now that my pieces are cut to width, now I'm going to trim my drawer sides to length. Then I do the same for the fronts and the backs. I cut the drawer bottoms out of a piece of 1/4-inch mahogany that I got from an old hutch that somebody was throwing away. Just using my normal blade, I cut a dado out of the front, the sides, and the backs to accept the drawer bottoms. Then I readjust my fence and run all the pieces through one more time to complete the dado. After that, I install a 1/2-inch dado stack to cut the rabbets to accept the fronts and the backs. Before assembling the drawers, I sand all the pieces inside and out up to 180. Using glue and some clamps, I assemble the drawers using 1-inch brads to secure them together while the glue sets. Then I measure to confirm square before I set it aside and just repeat the process 5 more times. Using pocket holes and some glue, I install the toe kicks. Notice I'm using a 2-inch scrap clamped to the carcass to make it easier to maintain the proper distance without having to hold them on a line. To help hide the plywood edges, I've decided to miter this front piece of toe kick. I cut it to rough length Then slowly sneak up on the fit until it's perfect. Once it's a good fit, I mark out my pocket holes, drill them, and then attach using some glue and pocket holes. Next, I assemble the drawer slides and the drawers. I won't get into how I do this in this video, as I plan to do a video in the future on different drawer assembly methods. But what you do see now is my preferred method of doing this. Next, I mill up some maple out of some 4/4 stock for my drawer fronts by flattening one edge on the jointer, trimming to width on the table saw, then jointing one face and planing to thickness. Then cutting each piece to length on the miter saw. A real easy way to set your router up when doing stile and rail cutting is to buy or make your own setup blocks. Once you have your router positioned with each bit, mark on the setup block and keep it for future use. Next, out of some 1/2-inch plywood, I cut my drawer and door panels, making sure to cut each panel 1/8 of an inch smaller in each direction. Then I set up a featherboard and position the blade to make a 1/4 inch rabbet all the way around each side of my door faces. Now to dry assemble all the door and drawer fronts. The assembly fit good. Now it's time to add some glue. The reason for using 1/2-inch panels is so once the 1/4 inch groove is in, they still fit flush on the backside. So just a quick tip, when I was trying to get these drawer fronts together, I couldn't seem to get them in square, even though I knew my joinery was perfectly square. What I did realize that if I took and put them in clamps and pulled them together, they pull themselves into square most of the time. Just like that, this drawer face is in perfect square. Just remember, don't add too much clamping force, you'll bow the boards. Once the drawer faces are out of clamps, I sand them and the carcass up to 180 and prep them for paint. So before I built this vanity, I did a lot of research, and what I found was everybody remodeling their vanity put in sliding shelves. So I decided just to skip the remodel and go right to a full extension drawer under my sink, and to use the cupboard doors I had made as an illusion and just use them as drawer fronts. If you've seen some of my previous videos, you will have seen this in the background. This was attempt number 1. It had a tragic accident. I was lifting it off my assembly table and I dropped it and broke the back. I believe it was beyond repair, so I just rebuilt. And to quote a YouTuber that helped motivate me to start making my own videos, wood burns and you can rebuild it. I'll link that video in the description. At this point, I'm ready to finish prepping for painting, so I strip off the drawers and the slides. I start by oiling the inside of the carcass and then apply 3 coats of wipe-on polyurethane. Then I apply 2 coats of primer to the carcass and drawer fronts, followed by 3 coats of enamel paint. After the paint cured, I added the drawer slides, attached the drawer fronts to the drawer boxes, then attached the cabinet hardware, and there we have the finished product. I really think this vanity turned out amazing, and with tons of space, it should work well for years to come. If you have any questions or any ideas on things I could have done better, please leave a comment below. If you enjoyed this video, please hammer that thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that little bell notification so you don't miss when I upload new content. And don't forget to tune into future videos where I try my hand at doing an epoxy countertop for this vanity. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you on the next project.